Hey, good morning and welcome to Guided Meditations and More. My name is Ade Richardson, and this is normally a 8 a.m. Eastern Time meditation. It's a daily meditation, but I've also been hosting interviews with spiritual teachers, seekers, and sometimes professors and variety types of people. Most of them have some sort of experience or for spirituality and spiritual journey. So they share a little bit about that, here. And today, I have the great pleasure to have with us for conversation, Raan Oosha. Welcome, Raan.
Grand Risings, Ade.
Thank you for joining us today. So I was talking to, Raan and I have been friends on Facebook. We think we met through Buddha at the Gas Pump community page, Facebook community page. So for those of you who don't know, if you're interested in, similar type of interview sort of setup, Buddha at the Gas Pump is a great source. Rick Archer is a great host, and he interviews all types of people from all different types of spiritual disciplines. So it's Buddha at the Gas Pump if you're interested in that. And that's where we met, because Rick created a community page. So I think we had had some discussions on there. That's a place where people discuss and debate different spiritual topics and things of that nature. So let's I'm going to read your bio. It's a brief bio. Okay, so the story is, and this is in Raan's words, the story is, I'm a reader, grew up in London, always questioned established traditions, got my first book on Zen at the age of 14 and embarked on a spiritual search. A few years ago, I became disillusioned with spirituality, the read-in practices, etc. It felt like a costume, not the truth. By chance, met a non-dual teacher. From there, everything changed. Okay.
Yes.
So let's go into some of that. Age 14, normally a lot of kids are reading comic books and things like that. How did you get your hands on a book about Zen? And if you don't mind sharing, what book was that?
The book was the Eightfold Path, my first book on Zen. And I think I was always drawn to something of the mysticism of Zen. Zen really appealed to me through movies, television programs, and that kind of thing. My parents were, my mum was a Christian and went to church, and that never appealed to me. So I was dragged there every Sunday until about the age of 11, when I decided no more. But I had always had this questioning. And when I read about Zen, it just, first of all, the Zen koans made it very interesting. The kung fu movies at the time, seeing people meditating, made it look really appealing. And I think on the outward surface look, it really appealed to me. It was different. It was Japan, the whole culture about it. So I really enjoyed that. And just to read about the koans and try to, at the time, understand them, which of course I didn't at all.
Yeah.
But yeah, it just gave me an insight into something different.
Yeah, so it was the aesthetics of it were appealing, and so what was the impact, of the book? Were you able to absorb what the teachings were in the book at that time?
Not, I mean, from here now, I can say I didn't really absorb it, but I think with these things, it takes time. And reading these kind of books, it may be a year, 2, 3, 10 years later that it begins to kind of infiltrate your life. And it was the first book, and it led to more. It led to deeper investigations, and I was also drawn to Bruce Lee, his philosophy of Jeet Kune Do. I think it's the way of the intercepting fist.
Mm.
And I watched a movie like, Enter the Dragon, and they had a documentary part of it where he talks about his philosophy. And something in that really appealed to me as well. I was always into sports, so I was trying to bring that philosophy into my life of being fluid. And there's this one quote he has in the movie. He says, if you pour water into a cup, it becomes the cup.
Yeah.
If you pour water into a teapot, it becomes a teapot. Be water, my friend. And that quote really stuck with me. So from there, the work of Bruce Lee, and I found out that he read a lot of work by J. Krishnamurti.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Which is how I discovered J. Krishnamurti.
Yeah.
Through Bruce Lee. So I think one of the earliest books was the Awakening of Intelligence by J. Krishnamurti.
Okay. And that was still at a fairly young age, or?
No, that must be now in my 20s, J. Krishnamurti.
Okay.
Yes.
And going back to the Bruce Lee with the water kind
Yes.
of metaphor,
Mm-hmm.
what do you think about that? First of all, how old were you when you listened to that?
I must have been early teens. I bought the film and documentary set, so I watched it over and over and over
Wow.
again. I watched it over and over again. I like Bruce Lee. I mean, the films, the way he was great. I love the films, but for me, it was the whole philosophy behind what he was teaching.
Yeah.
It was that really appealed to me.
So the phrase "be water, my friend," and
Yes.
it sounds to me like another way to say it is, if there's a big storm, and you want to be the tree that can, like you want to be like a tree, even if the tree is very thin and it bends with the storm. If you're rigid, it breaks off. So when I'm hearing to be water, it's reminded me of that. And as a young age, like in your teens, it sounds like something within you would you say something within you was yearning for that? I don't know what to call it, but that wanting to relax or wanting to flow with life, or did you feel any tension at that age? Was there anything that was going on where was contrasting that philosophy in a way?
Yeah, I mean, tension. I think there was a lot of anxiety in my life.
Okay.
I grew up with a stammer. Do you know stammer? Speaking wise. So I couldn't really speak.
Yeah.
For instance, going to the corner shop for me and ordering something I had to go through a whole rehearsal. I would be outside the shop. Okay, then this is what I want. I need to get this. This is how I'm going to say it.
Wow.
Because I had to rehearse everything.
Wow, that sounds very stressful. And when you say my dad had the same thing, really, really bad.
Yes.
And I think you've seen his interview.
Yes,
he's
I saw it.
a professor, yes. And he like lectures, for a living basically. But it was all throughout his teens. It was really, really bad, and he would share those same, similar stories as you're sharing. So I'm sorry to interrupt, but go on.
Yeah, I mean, so growing up with that, and it just made, speaking to strangers just a nightmare. of course, so it became very difficult. And I think I had a lot of this kind of tension inside of me. But it reminds me of something that I used to really like, hip hop music. I don't know if you know KRS One, EPMD,
Yeah.
Public Enemy back in those days, yes. But when I used to rap, I would never stammer. So my mum said to me, Brian, but when you rap, you don't stammer. And what I think it was, when I was rapping, I wasn't me. I was playing a role. Do you know what I mean? So I'm playing this role as this rapper.
Yeah.
So I think looking at it, that's the first time I realized that the character Brian is a role. Because as me, I have to stammer. But when I was doing the rapping, there was no stammer because I was being something else. At the time, I couldn't have intellectualized to you like this.
Yeah.
But I think there was something inside which kind of went, that's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Why is it? So yeah, I think so. Maybe it's also, and I played a lot of sport as well as a child. I played a lot of sport, and there was a football team, the Dutch football team, that really had an effect on me. And they had a philosophy called total football. And what this was, where everybody on the pitch could play in any position. So it was fluid, it was movement, it was unstructured. If you were on the right, it didn't mean you could stay there. You can move to the left, and it was fluid. So I think that as well, the kind of way I thought about life, wanting to do many different things, being able to enjoy myself in whatever sport I was in, if it was rapping, if it was sport, anything else. So maybe that comes into the philosophy of the water and the cup.
Yeah. Yeah. And it seems in alignment with perhaps one may say our more authentic self as well.
Yes.
I get the feeling that for me, I really don't like the feeling of being confined or controlled or anything like that, because I think it's in opposition, or there's a knowing of this authentic sense of self, that is ever expanding and fluid, and it seems to have those qualities. If there is any qualities, these words don't really capture it. But let's see. Where should we go? Where should we go next?
Let's go into. I started off by saying I'm a reader.
Yeah.
I think maybe start with that. So, as a child, I loved investigation books. Private detectives trying to find the answer, trying to find the clue.
Yeah.
I think that was something in that I really was interested in, and I read a lot of books, story books as well as historical books and so on. And my father was a big reader as well, so he would always challenge me with questions. So I think I was always interested in finding out why, who. So you realize that a lot of the things that we take for granted are just kind of labels we put on things. So, for instance, the country of England is England because it's been an agreement between people from England and Scotland, and they made a line. It's a concept, it's an idea, but we make that true. So what is the truth? I mean, so what is really going on? What's happening behind the scenes? What's really going on? And my dad was into conspiracy theories. So, JFK, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, all that. And I started to read up on that as well. What is really going on behind the scenes? I wanted to find out.
Yeah.
Through politically and spirituality. I wanted to know what it was what is going on. What's the truth? Because I'm going to school every day and I'm being told this and I'm being told that, but is that really, am I just being told an opinion, an idea? So I was always questioning it in that way.
Yeah.
And the history that my dad was telling me, I wasn't getting at school. So he was teaching me one thing at home. At school, I was getting a completely different kind of history. So I think I always had a questioning nature.
Yeah. So you were questioning the external things,
Yes.
and at some point, it sounds like the attention started to move inward as well.
Yes. See, on both ways. So in my 20s, I went out with, I had a girlfriend who ran an alternative health center. So there I'm coming into contact with astrologists, chakra readers, past life regressionists. So that's my everyday life. And on the other side, I'm thinking about, conspiracy theories, what's going on. So the two were bridging together. I had that, so I was doing meditation stuff and I was doing yoga stuff. And as well as finding out what is really going on. And in one way, I guess, it's all kind of coming together, because then you look at organized religion. And I question my mum's religion a lot. I question, how is it that my mum is a Christian, considering what happened during slavery and so on. So I really questioned that.
Yeah.
Why is she a Christian? I couldn't quite understand why she would become one. If you look at the history. So I was going into that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and what answers did you come up with, answers or more questions for these inquiries?
I came up with a lot more questions. I realized that orthodoxy religion, that wasn't for me. And the more I read about, I started getting a course into Krishnamurti and then Osho. I read a lot of Osho as well. Osho, I really liked because he brought more humor. Krishnamurti was very dry. I mean, he would just, very to the point. But Osho brought in a lot more humor into it. So I like the balance of both of them. And then I was reading, Eckhart Tolle as well. And, I read loads of the books.
Yeah, and those were powerful ones for me as well. Eckhart Tolle, when I first read his book, and he was talking about presence. I don't remember the words, but when I first read that, I intuitively knew what he was referring to. But it was so simple, because it has always, I've always known, it's so simple that you kind of miss it. And my experience with Osho as well is, I'm a very, I like to, I like to, I guess, to put it quite simply, I like to feel like I have control, and I can be very stuck in my ways. And I, growing up, I've had a lot of anxiety and, never cursing or anything like that. And a lot of these things, always feeling kind of stifled in a way. And then when I read one of Osho's books, like something just exploded. Like his humor and his, I don't know if it's the confidence or what the right word is, but I just felt like it kind of hit me really strongly at the time. After reading a few of his books, I was dancing in the street. I live in New York, so I was in Manhattan, dancing in the middle, people are just looking at me like I'm on drugs or something, and and that's I've been sober for a pretty long time, but that's what happened. It the feeling of it kind of turned up this heat of just wanting to break out of this shell, and really express what was going on within, the anger, the frustration, this, and so that was helpful on the journey. I don't know what was your experience with his teaching?
I loved Osho. He was forthright. He came out straight, but he said it in a way which resonated more with me. I mean, okay, no, which resonated so I could more comprehend. And also he did it with humor, and I really like that. And there was a playfulness about it. Whereas Krishnamurti definitely don't get that, or I didn't get that from Krishnamurti, but from Osho, definitely. And I remember one summer I spent by the river in Kingston in London reading Osho. He wrote a book, I think it was about watching the river go past. So I sat by a river for this 2 months of the summer holidays and just read Osho.
Yeah.
Yes. On my own, going back and forth with it, underlining passages. Oh, and I read at that same time, I forgot about this, I read that book, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. I read that at the same time while I was on the river that summer.
Yeah, that's a pretty well-known book, and
yeah,
I haven't had a chance. I think that one is still on my Kindle, so I haven't had a chance. At some point, I just stop. I just didn't have any desire to read or anything. So I pick up a book and I start reading a few pages, and I can't seem to get through it. So so that we talked about you picking up the first book on Zen at the age 14, dealing with the stuttering, throughout your life, the anxiety, and having this affection towards Bruce Lee, towards Zen, and these, the philosophy behind Bruce Lee with the fluidity. And so let's, from there, and we also talked about the conspiracy. Alexa was just
conspiracy.
telling conspiracy. So where did you have a teacher along any of these times, or were you practicing meditation or like formal meditation?
I was going to some classes. I was drifting between different classes with different teachers. So like I said, and around that time, my girlfriend at the time ran our health center. So I was with different teachers all the time. So I wasn't having that kind of structured meditation practice, but I was doing it on my own. And I found that quite difficult as well. The actual meditation practice, I did find that quite difficult. So I didn't think that was for me. But I was doing other practices. It was on my mind all the time.
So it was a sort of an inquiry that was just going on 24. The way that you were very contemplative.
Yes. So I'm moving forward a bit here now. So later on, so when I met you through Buddha at the gas pump, at that time, I had just discovered non-duality, and that was when I was listening to those shows 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I listened to all of them. Some of them I listened to 2, 3, 4 times.
Yeah.
So it was gradually increasing and increasing and increasing. I was working in a school at the time. I was a PE and drama teacher in a primary school,
Mhm.
working with children from the age of 4 to 11. So I was doing that at the same time. So as time was going on, I was more and more time was devoted to it. I wanted to see how I can bridge my school teaching with the spirituality. That was always something I wanted to bring together.
Yeah.
But I was in a kind of constrained environment working in a school. But fortunately, I had a great headmaster who allowed me a lot of leeway to kind of practice different ways of teaching and so on.
So you were teaching drama. So were you in the in theater and
Uh, no,
performing arts?
so what happened was I'll tell you the story. I was taking a class of year 2 at the time, so they were 6 years of age, and I was talking to them. I said to them, what would you like to do when you get older? And some of them were saying, Mr. I want to be a spaceman. I want to be this. And one child said to me, what would you like to do? And I thought to myself, okay, well, I've always wanted to do acting.
Mm.
But for me as a child, that was impossible because I couldn't, I had the stammer.
Mm.
So I couldn't do it. So from that child asking that question, I enrolled in an evening class, joined the drama school, did a 2-year course, and then started doing acting, really. And in fact, acting and being a school teacher is pretty much the same thing. A
Yeah.
teacher, you're on stage, you're on stage, you got your script, you got your audience, you got to keep them entertained. So and also I found later on that working in the drama, it's very freeing.
Yeah.
You have to get rid of all of this stuff, and I was really drawn to method actors who would really encompass the role. I was really drawn to that.
Which actors?
I think De Niro, I think, is a method actor. So basically, it's like, you live that character, you do it. This is who you are. You're not playing a role, you really go into it. So you learn the lines, then you forget the lines because you've taken them in so fully that it's you. And one teacher used to say to us, whatever you do in drama class, don't act.
Yeah.
I want it real. I want it real. And drama school is a great spiritual education, I found, because you're going deep into feelings, you're going deep into thoughts. What is my character thinking? What's my character feeling? What's my character doing? What's the impetus behind him reacting in this way? I find it very interesting.
Yeah, it can be, I have a little bit of experience with acting and filmmaking, the film world in general. And, that was one of my passions growing up. But yeah, it can be very therapeutic and, looking at underneath, what's the subtext here, what's that desire and I want to get your thoughts on this, but when I think of method acting and really fully engaging and fully giving yourself to a character to the point as, like your teacher said, don't act. I forget which. There was I think it was Jack Nicholson went to one of the great acting teachers. I forget who it is. The name of the teacher is escaping me, but he was preparing for a role. It might have been what was the big role? Something Chinatown.
Chinatown, yes.
Yeah, Chinatown. Yeah, so
Chinatown.
he was preparing, and he said, I just can't seem to get this scene. There's something," and the acting teacher, the great teacher, said, "This is what you do. You see that mouse in the in the corner? There was no
Yes.
mouse there." And he
Yes.
said, you go, you take this broom and kill it and do it convincingly. So you said, do it convincingly. So give yourself fully to it. And the reason I think this is similar, and I think this is, part of what you're getting at as well in terms of how it connects with spirituality on a deep level, is it seems in some ways we're still doing it. We are in ways. You're talking about identities, and we've taken on this identity. And I use this example quite often because it's one that comes up very strongly in my memory. It had an impact on me, and it's happened on different occasions. So I'm taking the subway on New York, and I see the passengers there, and they have, there's some that have their briefcase, they have their different, you have the doctors, the lawyers, all different walks of life, different people. And everyone looked really tired and stressed and upset in a way. And obviously part of this is my projection, is kind of maybe what I'm perceiving within myself. But the thought came to me, they all looked like innocent children. I just saw a sea, subway car filled with the innocence of children that took on this role a little bit too seriously. Like when you're growing up, you pretend to be your dad. You put on his shoes, you grab a briefcase, and you already start to, pretend to be this character. And it seems like in a way we've taken on this, like the method actor at the, well, maybe method actors don't do this, but usually you take on a role, and when the director yells cut, you take off the makeup, you take off the costume, and you go home to your wife or husband and kids and your mom. You take on another identity basically. But
Yes.
if you were to hold that costume on, 24 hours a day, it would become, exhausting.
Yes.
So.
Yes. Because I think, in life, so we create images of people. So when I speak to my mum, I don't speak to Joe, I speak to mum. When I speak to friends, so it's very rare that we actually speak to people. We create images of them, and then we speak to those images, which is why when they maybe change, things happen in your relationship. And we're constantly just creating where images talking back and forth. So we're not really getting past that. You're projecting it, or they're seeing an image, and you're projecting one, or you've created an image about them, and that's who you're speaking to. So maybe in the beginning, when you meet someone for the first time, you're seeing them as fresh and new, and you're interested in them. But after a while, I think what happens is, as human beings, we create, this person's like this.
Yes.
And we put them into these pigeonholes. And we do it with our brothers, sisters, mum, dad, grandmother. So I always say that I knew my grandmother, but I didn't know Mary. So when my grand died, I realized I didn't know her at all as a human being. After she died, I was told all these amazing stories about how she was, but I didn't know her. I had an idea of her, of this person. She was never young in my mind. She was always this old lady. But I never got past that. And I think as human beings, we do that. We talk to images with each other. And we don't listen, really. We're listening, or most of the time when we speak, we're actually thinking, when the other person's speaking, we're thinking of what we're going to say next, rather than truly listening. So it's images talking to each other, I think, most of the time.
Yeah.
So when you said, the childlike mind, And you hear this a lot. Some people say, let's get back to the child mind. Really, probably there only is the child mind, but because it's been layered by all these opinions, beliefs, ideas, do's, don'ts, rights, wrongs, mistakes, failures, we carry on this baggage.
Yeah.
Really, all there is the child mind, but we just lay it on with so much baggage. It gets way down. And then we kind of believe, then we can grow up believing that baggage is us. And many times we haven't even chosen the baggage ourselves. So it comes down to, I didn't choose to be called Afro-Caribbean. That's something, you know, you bring it on, or black, or I'm London, or whatever. I'm a teacher, drama teacher, spiritual, becomes layers and layers and layers and layers.
Yeah. Yeah, that you put it nicely, that that we're talking to the image that we've created of the other person. And I wonder if that's just part of the way the brain works, because the brain seeks, neuroscientists say that the brain was formed, its function is to seek certainty. So not to seek truth, but to seek, not to seek what's real or what's truth, but to seek a reality that is useful. There's a neuroscientist, Bu Lotto, who does a lot of work on the way our perception was created, like what influences our perception. So we create this reality because it's useful, and useful meaning it's a reality which helps us to be able to survive. He uses an example. At some point, there was a human that's walking, and there's a black hole in the ground, but there's no conceptual framework of, there's no basis of what reality is yet. So it was trial and error. The person walking in the front fell in the black thing in the hole, and then the other person, the brain, part of the survival mechanism, says, okay, that's a hole. And then we come up with language and everything else. So it is so much. It is so much part of our brain, the way. And I think in some ways, U.G. Krishnamurti kind of speaks to some of this, of why it's so hard to use that same faculty to step out of, this, I guess we could call it the matrix of identity, because it in my experience, we tend to be like a hamster running on the wheel, so creating this same sort of thing. And so we're in the experiences that I've had with my parents, and and my history and everything. And when I get into a relationship with someone else, I create these same habits and create this identity, of the other person, as a way to feel safe. So there's this, as a way to know, as a way to think that I know. And so would you say that in some ways it feels like kind of, in a way, when we think we know someone, we actually kill that person in a way. It kind of takes away the aliveness of the moment, of who, the essence of who that person is, that we're missing, by putting all these concepts and labels and everything on top of them, that baggage that you're talking about.
So I think it's useful in a, it's a tool to be used. So, for instance, like you said, if there's a hole in the ground, we understand that's a hole. Or if we saw a lion, we know that's a lion and it's dangerous to get away. But when it becomes our sole mode of communicating with somebody, we're being now used by that mode of thinking rather than we're using it. So it's a tool, it's a valuable tool, maybe an essential tool that we had to have as human beings, but maybe it's taken over so much of our lives. And this thing, this thing we want of certainty, which we think will keep us safe, maybe we're losing the essence of who this person is, and we're not seeing the humanity in the person if we just see them through this fixed image. So we never really get to know the other, and we're missing out on so much. We're not truly understanding something, and because we're a fear of the unknown, it's more secure being, I know this person, they are like this. But to sit back and watch these mechanisms in your mind just turning, you can see you're going into the same way of patterns, to look and listen to yourself, listen and approach it as new without having that label.
Yeah, that's a good point to that there is this. So it's not in a way. There's, if we're aware of it, there is some space from it. That witness in power. That's there. Let's maybe we could go into that part a little bit more.
Okay.
This witness in. I mean, is that something that came naturally for you, or is that something that it did take formal meditation, or?
Okay, so now I think we're getting to the part where I wrote at the end when I went to New York.
Yeah.
That's when a lot of it changed. So I met a teacher 3 years ago. I met a spiritual teacher 3 years ago, just by chance. And I discovered this term, non-duality. I discovered it. I saw it written somewhere and I thought, what's that? And I started reading. And I read, Krishnamurti is a non-duality teacher. I didn't know. Osho is non-duality. I met a teacher. I was going through YouTube one night, and I was looking at Muji interviews and Ade Shante and so on. And I came across this one interview by Rupert Spira. I listened to 20 seconds. I stopped it. I turned to my girlfriend and said, I found him. I found the guy. Little did I know that he was giving talks 20 minutes from my house.
Wow.
Yeah, a bit of luck. So the very first time I go to a meeting, and I think maybe consciousness decided this was the way. So I go to the first meeting. I am 35 minutes. I'm 40 minutes early. So I decide to go to a coffee shop. So I sit there, get my chair and table, and take out Rupert Spira's book, which I've bought. I'm reading his book, and I look up, and there in a table next to me is Rupert Spira. So he's talking and having a cup of coffee. I've got his book like this. I'm reading his book. I'm going, that's Rupert Spira. But you know what, Adi? You know what it did? He didn't have any halos running around his head. There was no bright lights, emanating from his person. He was a guy sitting in a coffee shop with a friend talking. And there were people walking past him. He had no idea who he was. And now I realized I was given a great gift. It just took away all of the, the mystique. It just blew it completely out of the window. He's a guy sitting, having a cup of coffee. And At the time, I didn't realize it, but later on, I realized it was a huge thing to see. So I'm going to his talks, and the clarity of how he spoke, it just resonated. So at the time as well, I wanted to find a yoga which was more feeling based. So I go onto the internet and I look out for yoga. I put in non-dual yoga. And I thought, and I found one. And it was Ellen Emmett, who I didn't realize he's married to Rupert Spira. So, yeah. And also he's doing a class 25 minutes from my house. So, so I'm now, going to see Rupert I think it's twice a month. And I went on a weekend retreat with Ellen.
Yeah.
And now the fire is just burning. And at the same time, I'm watching every Buddha at the gas pump. I'm watching, this thing about being the witness, who you really are. And they always say it's who you are. It's what you are naturally. It's your essential nature. So I'm doing the practicing, and I'm feeling this, but I'm getting it intellectually. I'm understanding, yes, the order is now. I understand that. I understand time's an illusion. I understand that. Yeah, but I'm getting it intellectually. But for the last 20 years, I've been getting it intellectually. I understand Krishnamurti intellectually. So I've been reading about an orange, and I've been holding an orange, but I haven't tasted an orange. And the frustration was, I have to taste this orange. Because I felt that for many years I've been a fraud, in the spiritual. I had the spiritual books. I knew some of the terminology, but that wasn't enough. I wanted to find out, every teacher has said, from who I've listened to, it's your divine nature. It's simple. It's a shift of perception. It's simple. If it's so simple, then why is it that I'm not getting it? Why is it, if it's my true nature, why I can understand you, but I don't feel it? I want to know. I don't want to keep going to retreats year after year after year after year. I want to know now. I want to know. So I was practicing that, and then I bought what I think was one of my favorite books ever, was Perfect Brilliant Stillness by David Cass. I think it's one of my favorite spiritual books. Anyway, I remember going to Kingston, not Kingston, what was it? It was Kensington Park, and reading his stuff and sitting there, and then the frustration, why am I not getting it? Why am I not getting it? Because I've had enough of the books. I've had enough of listening to these teachers talk about this stuff. I've had enough of it. I've done it, I know now that I had used the books as part of my identity. I liked having the books on my shelf, Adi. I liked having, I had them there, Eckhart Tolle and Osho. I liked having them there. I think, that was an ego thing for me, but it wasn't enough anymore, and I had to know. So I went to New York with my girlfriend 2 years ago, and one day we're walking out, and all of a sudden, I'm watching, and I think, oh my, I'm aware that I'm seeing. There's awareness of seeing. There's awareness of thoughts. There's awareness of this body. This body is not, I am not this body. I am not these thoughts. I'm aware of watching. I'm not watching. Watching is happening. So I'm walking around New York, just kind of going, oh my, no. And my girlfriend's probably thinking, he's going crazy, because I'm just kind of, okay. And I'm doing this. I'm doing this because it's like, it's like a fog had been just, and I don't know if it was, I don't think it was New York. I was there. I was just, and for the whole time I was there, it was like, wow, and I was watching everything. There was watching of everything, watching my thoughts, watching the character Brian, watching the character Raan, watching what's going on just for the whole time. And that changed everything completely.
So you tasted the orange.
I tasted the orange, and it was like, it was like, and the seeking stopped. From that time, the seeking energy just stopped. And how I can describe it is, so imagine you're playing a computer game, and you're playing a one-player computer game. Yeah, so I'm playing this character. Then imagine now I can play two characters at the same time. So I'm playing Johnny and I'm playing Freddie. I'm playing two characters. I'm playing them. Now I can play three characters, then four characters, but it's me playing all four characters.
Yeah.
But imagine consciousness is playing 7.2 billion characters.
Mm.
And the reason why they're different is because the different traits, they've grown up in different areas of the world. They got different baggage, they got different ideas, but the same thing is streaming through all of them. It's the one thing. It's the one thing. It's not separate, me and you. That's just the identities. The consciousness going through all 7 billion people. And so it's not that you are consciousness, there is consciousness.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so from then it became, so you're in this thing. And what came was that it wasn't this amazing thing. I didn't think, oh my God, it's this amazing thing. It's not, because there's no kind of difference between me and that person. Words are very difficult, so there wasn't, I'm here. That was none of that at all. There wasn't a specialness about it. In fact, it was quite ordinary.
Yeah.
It wasn't. And the whole idea of teacher-student kind of gone as well. Because how can there be teacher-students as well? So, and so after that, I came, and there was this, I didn't sleep for about 3 months properly. I was sleeping, but I was awake sleeping.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was awake sleeping. And then of course I was still working. Fortunately, at the school they hired an assistant for me that particular year. So sometimes it works out perfectly because Ade, I was gone. So she would come up to me, goes, Brian, today you're teaching in that class, you're over there and you go there. She was doing all the other stuff. And blessing, thank you very much, because I was gone. But it was it was my last year of working in the school. It was the best school year I ever had.
Yeah.
Because I learned something amazing, as well, how I taught. And beforehand, I was really interested in winning prizes for the school in sports, but that kind of went. And I realized something as well. So we started creating teams for the children who weren't at the level of making the school sports teams. So like in most schools, there's that most of the children don't get to play in them at all in the sports teams because they're seen as not as skilled as the others. So we started creating these events and picking the children who wouldn't normally play. And that was just incredible, because what I found was that you pick children who normally don't perform, but when you pick them and you say you're part of the team, and you get their parents to come and watch, and the parents are there taking photographs and everyone's watching, you see a performance level increase. And I sat there sometimes watching and thinking, oh my God, what have I been doing for the last 13 years? Because all I can say is that in teaching, all you can say is Under these conditions, with this teacher, in this school, in this hall, this child achieved this result. That's all you can ever say. And I just saw it just expanded everything I felt about teaching.
So it sounds like you were given some students who maybe normally didn't have the opportunity at that time to realize a little bit more of their potential, to just because they weren't out there playing. Maybe it was more about the numbers or winning the games and things like that. But now there's a wider perspective and more about lifting up these kids to a higher potential, and sometimes like in terms of with a teacher, and I experienced this with my teacher. Sometimes I feel like when I'm in situations where he'll just, okay, I'm just gonna, Ade's in this situation, and he has to go through this process. You can't, you don't know what's there. You don't want to cheat someone out of the experience of going through some things in life that might not come naturally to them, but you don't know what potential's there unless you start, unless you go through it. So it sounds like you were affording these kids this opportunity to see this within themselves, that challenge them a little bit. Could part of it is that they're challenged as well.
Yes, and also the key is I'm still learning.
Yeah.
I'm still learning, and what's happened since that time from New York is that's all there is. I'm still learning. Every second of every day, every conversation is you're still learning. And that way, everything is fresh.
Yeah.
Fresh. So it came to the point as well. So being here in Bali now, I'm skipping forward again. So in Bali, I've been doing lots of writing of poems and stories and writing songs. And what's come about is that I think the biggest inhibitor of human creativity is yes, no, right, wrong, failure, and mistake. They are crushing to human creativity, human endeavor, to be able to try something new. But what's come about is that they're just concepts. They're just ideas. So for instance, you could be sitting down to write and you have a feeling and the feeling today, today, I don't feel like writing today. And instead of saying, that's just a feeling, and you could say, oh that's interesting. I don't feel like writing today. That's interesting. Okay, so what can I write about not feeling like writing today? That's interesting. So through that, if you don't disavow that feeling and you go into it, there's a wealth of creativity behind it. Even you could even sit down and say, okay, today I'm feeling bored. I don't want to write today, I'm bored. Okay, interesting. What is bored? But what's the feeling? Not the word, what's the feeling? Oh, it feels, is there a bit of anxiety? Is there a bit of fear? And when you go through that, there's stories and poems and songs that just come out because you're not making that feeling wrong. You're actually not disavowing the moment. And I think what you see sometimes in the spiritual field, there can be this layer of people putting on positivity. But I think in the oneness of it all, it encompasses all of the fears, the doubts, the bliss, the anxiety, all of it. You look at all of it and you don't disavow any of it. So if there is anxiety, it comes through, you feel it and you let it go. Doubts come through, you feel it and you let it go. So I think you feel even more. But every day you're on this learning process and you stay with what there is. And I think that leads to great creativity. But unfortunately, we're taught that to disavow the feelings of they're bad. So bored is not good, or anxiety. But if you go into it, and from there also, if you go into it and you're with someone and you're listening. So listening, the art of listening, I think, is to be still and to look without saying anything. And through that listening, which I think could bring about harmony between people, is if you really listen to somebody, not with your ears, but with your whole being, something comes about. A great change comes about. A transmutation of energy, I think.
Yeah, beautifully put. Yeah.
And that is I think, the art of creativity. So if you look at turmoil around the world, if somebody's going through something, so incidents of racism, if you listen to them, don't listen to them, don't try and excuse it, don't, just listen to what someone's saying, and feel what they're saying without trying to make it better, without trying to, to not say they're wrong, just to listen. Just from that, great change can happen if you truly listen.
Yeah, and you just saying that reminds me of our jazz. When we were messaging on Facebook, you were saying let's do the conversation sort of like jazz. And when I think of musicians, there's this language. There is this listening. And they know they go with the emotion, and sometimes they get into this zone where just each person is a unique and necessary part, thread in the fabric of the music. And when everyone is playing together, it's really beautiful. And there is this sort of, I think, innate harmony that we can tap into. You talk about creativity, and I think, and how some in the spiritual world, and including myself at times, I probably still do it. I'm not cured of any of these any of these habits of mine, but the spiritual bypass, and that's the term that some people use. When we're not wanting to look at, I guess, what Carl Jung would call those shadow aspects of our, just basically the parts that make us human, that we've condemned and judged. Society has in some ways condemned and judged as well, so we do it within ourselves, again, as a way of protecting the self, the ego, protecting the identity. And so like you said, the not to be so quick to dismiss or to judge. That when boredom comes up, when frustration comes up, to be able to feel it. And I think what it sounds like what you're getting at is, when we don't resist these things, when we kind of relax with what is. And I guess part of the resistance that we do unconsciously is to put in labels and concepts on top of things, because like you talked about earlier, it's assuming that we know what it is, when we don't really know. So you feel the boredom, you feel the fear, and going deep inside of it, then you can even get rid of the label fear, and feel the sensation in the body, the kind of the energy of it. And I find when we get really deep through it, sort of this energy and awareness, you know, that's there, and the creativity, you know, me being an artist as well, I could really identify with that. You know, I write poetry as well, and some of my best poems came after I just allowed myself to feel what was going on, kind of relax with it. If I had to cry, I would cry, or, you know, whatever needed to express would express. But especially those things that I would feel are the worst things. They're usually not, but those things I had promised myself I wouldn't do this again, or I wouldn't, you know, this habit that keeps coming up. And then I did it, and then there's this resistance. I don't want to look at that. I can't believe. And so I distract, trying not to feel it, go on social media a lot, you know, kind of distract in all different ways. And then, as you said, you know, you said it really beautifully, when I could just, okay, well, really, what is that? You know, and really feel it. And it's from there, something opens and creativity just comes out. You know, that thing that I thought was the worst thing in the world has now transformed into a beautiful creative expression. It doesn't have to be in the arts or whatever. It could be a creative, you know, it's, in a way, we're always creating, you know, we're creating and recreating this sort of reality, you know, our own kind of personal realities in a sense, you know. So it seems like we're always in this creative flow, just like nature. But if I'm resistant, then that creativity is stagnant, and it's, you know, it's kind of like putting a dam in the river, and nothing's going on. And that can lead to also health problems, and, you know, expressions that don't really serve us very well, or others, you know. It could come out in all different unhealthy ways.
Yeah, it seems that way. I mean, there's a teacher called Gabor Mate, and he talks about how repressed you know, Gabor Mate, repressed emotions. And there was this, and doing some of these practices has seen that how I myself have held in thoughts and feelings that I had forgotten about completely. So I was doing a practice, you know, and I called it talking to my younger self, giving advice to my younger self. So I would say, okay, then at 16, I went through this incident, but I was taught I would do it as if the 16-year-old is here with me right now. And you realize that over time, you collect things that you hear stories, or things happen to you that you haven't forgotten, you haven't let go of. And I think they store in the cells deep. And if you allow yourself to really look at them, you can look at them and then let them go. Because it seems like these feelings, they want to be held and then released.
Yeah.
They want you to hold, they want you to acknowledge and say, you know, they're knocking at the door and say, let me in, let me in. And for years you say no. They want you to open the door, let them in, make them a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, listen to what they got to say, then they will go on their way. But if we keep the door shut, then numbers of them, after a while, there's lines of people lining up outside your front door because you won't let them in.
Yeah, that's the cup of tea reminds me of a something that Ram Dass. You've heard of Ram Dass?
Yes, I have. Yes.
Yeah, he said, I haven't gotten rid of one of my neuroses. He said, not one of them. I have not gotten rid of them. But now when they come up, he says, and I may be misquoting, but he says, now when the neuroses come up, they're like little smooths, and I invite them in for a cup of tea, and I don't take them so seriously. And like you said, and, you know, and then they'll be on their way. So it's the you know, sort of the attachment or the clinging to, not really to these things, but to our conceptual frameworks, the meaning that we put behind them, and which, as you were saying, is kind of underneath these concepts. A lot of them is just emptiness. You know, there's nothing there. So there's no concrete thing there. And I think that's what causes this you know, perpetual cycle of like a dog chasing its tail, because you never get it. You know?
Yeah. And I think for us to become universal man and woman in this world, to get past some of the things we're still talking about, we've been going on about for hundreds of years, the same problems. But I guess we have to go through that for part. But I think what we're meant for is to become universal human, one conscious human. And then I think we're only on the brink of what this human body is capable of, what can be done in regards to expressing human life. But I think we still need, as a society, to go through acknowledging what's gone in the past, looking at it, change the systems, because the systems that we live under are based on power, greed, and corruption, division, and hate. Those systems are archaic.
Yeah.
And they don't serve universal man, woman.
Yeah, it seems like we are. I mean, I believe, and you know, this is my hope, is that we're moving towards a more compassionate cooperation, you know, more community-based way of living, rather than relying on polarity and, you know, this side versus that side. You know, that's where sort of the ego way of living is rooted. And maybe we'll, you know, as long as we have a body, we're probably going to have some of that. But right now it's magnified, you know,
Yes.
a ton. And I guess, you know, the hope I have is from what we, you know, a lot of the, you know, what seems like things are getting really bad out in the world. But one way I look at it is that it's becoming very visible. So the light of awareness seems to be expanding. So you have a dark, messy room, you're tripping over clothes constantly, and you've kind of learned to avoid certain things because, I'm not going to walk in that direction. But then someone, you don't know, it's a messy room, someone turns on even a little light, now you start to see a little bit of the mess, and you're like, oh my gosh, but it's always been there. And then someone turns on more light, and then you're kind of like, wow, things have gotten really bad. But it's just become, it's always been like that. It's become visible. And so now we can do something about it.
Yeah, and if we start from experience and reality is that we don't actually have to find this more compassionate way of being. That's our inherent nature as compassionate beings, because our inherent nature is there. Me and you are one. I don't mean it doesn't make sense, but there is just one. That's our reality. That's our experience. We don't say, I'm looking at two experiences now. There's one experience. So that's our reality. And our reality, as if you see children, empathy is a natural for human beings. Compassion is natural for human beings. Sharing is natural for human beings. And I think there are some societies where the word I does not really exist. Yes. So to give something to one person in that tribe wouldn't make sense. What does that mean? They wouldn't keep it for themselves. So I think if we go from our experience of truth on our reality, we don't see two two trees arguing over who's better. We don't see that. We don't see a leaf saying, "Oh, I'm better than you because I'm on a higher branch." We don't see that. And if you look at how gardens grow, they work together in symbiosis. It's a natural way of being. So we don't have to search for anything or look for anything. It's there, our true nature.
Yeah, it's natural. It seems to me, yet um, and harmonious in a way, but not in the way that I've been conditioned to feel like harmony should look like. So it's not all butterflies and
No,
everything's nice.
no,
Nature
no.
could be very
Yeah,
destructive,
yes, yeah.
as well. But they, I don't think they're holding resentments
Yeah,
about it. So,
yeah. And so that is, and then it comes down to, so meditation is not something you do. Meditation is something that you are. You don't need to go out and, well, you can, if you would like to, join a class and meditate. But meditation is who you are. Meditation can be doing your washing up or waiting in line in the supermarket, which I find probably is a great place to have your meditation practice, or when you're driving your car, or when you're having this interview, or whatever you do. So it doesn't need to be searched for, it's your inherent nature. And when you come from there, things happen. And sometimes incidents happen, not great, but you take it on as part of the meditation. So maybe we can do as a future is take meditation out of the halls, out of the set, take it out of the halls, out of the retreats, and bring it into the supermarket. Bring it into walking into everyday life. Bring it into everyday communication, because maybe the meditation practice or meditation play, the play of meditation begins after you leave the class. When you leave the class, that's when the meditation, because then you're going to get, someone's going to cut you up in your car or whatever. That's your meditation practice. And that's the way to bring on a universal man and woman, I think, which will have tough times. So like now, there's always learning, frustration arises, anger will arise, but now it's dealt with in a different way.
Yeah, I think that part is important. So, you were saying a little while back that compassion is not something that we necessarily have to cultivate or create. It's in our nature, So, and it seems like part of what we were talking about earlier with being with our emotions, putting attention on them, and rather than bypassing. So if there's some fear or some frustration, rather than being so quick to put the label, like you said, those aspects of ourselves are knocking on the door and wanting to be embraced, wanting some attention, and we can give it the light of awareness, and be with the body, be with the emotion. And like for me, like even just being with it right now and feeling a little bit of my nervousness and a little bit of my uncertainty, maybe not knowing where to go next, what's going to come up, next, and allowing that to, and what's coming up next is a knock at the door, and allowing that to be there, is a very uh, it I feel like that's a form of compassion, you know, of self-compassion, and perhaps that's where it starts. You know, that's where that compassion starts from. It because for me it feels like simply being as you are when the resistance is relaxed, and being as I am underneath the concepts and everything else, you know, that's there.
Hmm.
I'm just
Yeah,
gonna.
and I think, yeah. Sorry. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Mhm, mhm.
Okay, yeah, I just had
Oh
to
yeah.
get the door there.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, yeah, and it's when we can look at these things, you know, so honestly and openly, you look deep at these feelings without the label is such an inhibitor, because I think the label comes with so much baggage, fear, you know, we've been taught the meanings of these words, we've been taught how you should act, and even as men, you know, sadness you don't want to show, the toxic masculinity, you don't want to show fear or doubt, none of that stuff. And to being able to transmute it is a wonderful thing, it's a beautiful thing that we can do. And I remember that's why, you know, one of the things I said, you know, I mentioned to you about jazz. One of, I think, the greatest spiritual teachers is John Coltrane. I think
Oh,
he's I think he's one of the great non-dual teachers out there. He doesn't use words, but he uses his saxophone. And also another, and how he played with his band and that back and forth. And the Jimi Hendrix Band of Gypsies album. that to me, and you find there's so much magic in all of these things
yeah,
when you sit back and you listen. There are teachers everywhere. There are great teachers who are, you might not see them. They could be sitting on the side of a road.
mm,
They could be on a stage. They could be in the shops. But then we don't have this baggage of you're this and you're that. And when you come with, I'm still learning, then you approach everything as fresh and new. And then you're learning all the time.
yeah,
And the whole thing probably is a great jazz piece of chaos. You've got, you know, your instrumentalists playing all this stuff going on. And that's what the world is, this this jazz symphony. And that's what the world is.
yeah. Nicely put. I like Miles Davis had a saying. He said he doesn't like music that has no imperfections. You know, if it just sounds too perfect, he doesn't really like that. You know, he likes the having some sort of imperfection in the playing. Yeah.
But that's in also, I think in, don't quote me here, but I think it's in Islam when they make those carpets and they purposely put in one mistake.
Oh,
Yeah. And and there's this thing with Miles Davis and he's talking to Herbie Hancock. And Herbie Hancock is playing on the piano and he makes a mistake. But Miles Davis doesn't see it as a mistake. He sees it as a change of key. And I think that's genius because there was no really mistake, only in Herbie Hancock's mind. But Miles didn't see it that way. He didn't see a
yeah.
mistake. He saw a change, a way to go somewhere new.
Yeah, yeah, and it I think that's more in alignment with the mystery of who we are. You know, this seems like there's this great mystery, and to think that we know what it is or how it should be, which I'm doing all the time, you know, and not really always conscious of it, but yeah, you know, sometimes I'm feeling like you know, there's a way that I want to be perceived, or I want to be liked, or I want approval, and then there's the fear of, oh my gosh, if I don't if I don't get that, or if things don't go a certain way, or if I'm not a certain way, and not really having a clear idea of what that way appears to be, you know, that's part of the strange thing, you know, about it. It's you know, when I think about, you know, it sounds in a way, although there's some innocence in that as well, in a way, there's this, you know, when I think about the great mystery of, you know, I'm not realizing, even if we look within our own body, you know, the heart is beating. We're not like paying attention all day, making, oh, you know, imagine if we had to make the
Yeah.
functioning of our body, you know, go on. Like, there's so much this, and I guess what I'm getting at is there's this intelligence at work, you know, constantly, that is far beyond the brain consciousness,
Mm.
you know, that in this way that I think that things should be, you know. And
Mm.
an example of this as well, in terms of going back to the arts, in filmmaking, you know, sometimes you know, I make film, I direct films and things like that, and sometimes I'm working with an actor, and we do a scene, and the actor doesn't feel connected with it, and they just feel like it was a bad take. You know,
Mm.
they felt their own, let's say, insecurity or anxiety, and maybe they felt some resistance there, and they felt like for it to be a good take, you know, I want to be able to relax with that and have been able to feel fully embraced in all that I am. And but for me, looking at the scene as a director, I'm like, wow, that was great. That was, you know, I really felt that. So there was something that they're not seeing, that
Mm.
in how they're perceiving it, where I'm looking on screen, I was like, that's great. And maybe they did another take where they felt like they were really embracing themselves and, you know, very
Mm.
relaxed. But that
Mm.
one just didn't work.
Mm.
So, you know,
Yeah, and maybe so if their thought was that didn't go well, maybe that scene required a feeling of it didn't go well for
mm,
them to for you to, yeah, so it was perfect that I didn't go well feeling they had, but we've been taught to maybe say that's not great, but it was perfect what you required as a director at the time to see it in that way.
yeah. You know, and it kind of brings up how little, that it's not part of it is, you know, to put it quite bluntly, is not about me, you know, and which goes against my sort of self-centeredness and narcissistic aspects or whatever. But it's not about me, you know. It's not about me coming across good. It's not about me getting it right. It's not, you know, this is not all about me. So it's that's like a sort of concept, that is, you know, fairly, uh, not, I wouldn't say new to me, but it's something that's taken some time to kind of relax with, and to see that there is, as you said, this one human, you know, where there is this one, oh, there is this one awareness, and this one awareness, running through the different forms. One form might be feeling blissful in one moment and just totally, joyful and relaxed, and one form maybe feeling insecure, a little bit of fear or whatever. But I don't, in this brain consciousness, I don't have the whole perspective, the wide view that sees that perhaps all of these little parts are exactly the way that they're supposed to be, just like in nature, how some things appear to be. When I see the lion attack the whatever, the gazelle or whatever, when it attacks it, it looks really horrible, but that's part of nature, I don't know, that's a bad example of the gazelle.
But you remember in the scene in the Usual Suspects, and they're doing the lineup scene, yes? And Bryan Singer says, I couldn't get a real take because they were all laughing and joking, they were messing around. I couldn't get it right. And then they go into the editing room, and the guy says, you know what? I can make something out of this scene. It didn't go how he expected it to, but it became the best scene in the movie. Yeah. What he thought was bloopers were actually the best scenes in the movie. But I guess director had to get out of his way. So a lot of times in creativity, the character Raan has to get out of the way and let it come through in whatever way that is. I don't know, have you ever, question for you now, written something and you thought, wow, how did I write that? Or what happened there? Or, what's going on? Or you read it a day later and you think, how did I come up with that?
Yeah, definitely. And a lot of times before that, it just comes out of nowhere. But a lot of times it has been when I've felt some strong emotional stuff that I gave some attention to. And then, the creative stuff just spills out. And the habit is after I do, I want to recreate it. And that doesn't really work. It just comes of its own and goes, and it's not mine to keep. So again, it's not about me.
So that's why before I said, rather than meditation practice, meditation play. Practice seems to be, and I think I learned this from Krishnamurti, a kind of, continuation of an old pattern, of ideas being formed already. But in the meditation play, which is, I think, what children do automatically, is they go in the moment. They're doing it. It's fresh. Everything is fresh. And if you watch children play, it's fresh. They're not practicing playing. That moment is happening there and then. So I think this word play seems to be how humans were, and they still are in some aspects, some parts of the world. We've learned this thing about work, and you got to work, and you got to do this, you got to practice. But ultimately, I think it's all about the play. And when we meditation play, it then incorporates every single aspect of our life. And now we're playing, we can let loose, we can play jazz. We can just go with it. If we take the play into everything we do.
That's a good point. I'm glad you brought that up, because it's the neuroscientist Bulatto, when he talks about the brain seeking certainty and how it is important to, the way that our brain, is conditioned to work. We go from point A to point B. That's the way we're thinking, in this kind of linear way. And what he was saying, approach things without going to point A. And then you're in that place of uncertainty. And so how do we deal with uncertainty? He said, as you just stated very well, is we were given this thing called play, and that's how we can, And as you said, watching kids, there's this uncertainty, there's this spirit of curiosity and wonder, and I can almost pinpoint almost the exact time in my life that I crossed the line from play, where I was just doing things just for the joy of doing it, for the joy of discovery. It was just, there was a lot of joy and playfulness too, as as you said, crossed the line until where things became a workout, things became a practice. It became always about like the practice of, it became work, very serious work that will be evaluated, by myself or someone else. And, so getting back to that place, I feel like I'm getting a little bit more, coming around a little bit more, not there yet, but having taste of it here and there. So I'm just glad that you brought that up. I think that's important.
Yeah, I mean, if you speak to people, I think there's so many people who would love to dance. They see flamenco or tango on TV, they would love to dance, but they won't because embarrassment, fear, but their body wants to. They've watched the film, they've seen the dance, they heard the music, and they want to dance. They want to play the saxophone, but no, oh no, I won't do it. No, I won't do it. They want to go down the street and hold their hands and kiss whoever, they want to do these things, but they don't. So what are we here for then? Isn't that the very reason we're here? To explore all these things. Otherwise, why are we here? If we got opportunity to dance, then all this baggage we have, then we want something in it that wants to do it. Let ourselves free. Let ourselves free without judging ourselves, which is probably the worst ones. Oh, I'm no good, or this or that. Just let itself free. And we are going to feel that anxiety at the beginning. We are going to feel that. We are going to feel it. That's this. Okay. But if you've gone through that, then in this world, that's a massive achievement. That's a great achievement. And it's not only for you. You've done it for, I don't want to get too, but for the whole of mankind. In actuality, you've done it because someone's going to see you and go. Because I think when people see you go past these barriers, you effect a change in people on an unconscious level, on a vibrational level.
Yeah,
it affects everyone around. So it's not just you, and it also, because there is just consciousness, it can't be just you dancing. So when you meditate, it's not you meditating, meditation is happening. That's the whole world. When you dance, dancing is happening. That's the whole world. And even if you dance in your front room by yourself, but you're really enjoying yourself, that's dance. The world is dancing. And it must do something and it has to, because on the quantum level, there's no separation. So it has to be going out into the world.
Yeah. And I feel like see, part of my just the way that I am, the part of my brain is thinking, okay, well, let me put this into practice. I'm gonna play. What time should I dance? What song should it be? How long do I have to do it until I get the results of being free and playful? So that's just the way that so it's kind of okay. I'm gonna let that be there, but and it's going back to Krishnamurti, again, who is this same I mean, part of the thing for me is just have it not taken so seriously, and having a view of the whole apparatus at work. You know, I have my own unique nervous system, my neuroses, all these different things, while also having this very deep residing feeling of I don't, you know, the labels and words, just, you know, this peace, this knowingness, this awareness that you spoke about. But but these other parts are fun to play with too. So, you know, I joke around about the brain wanting to organize everything that you just said into a way that will make it useful for me to get some sort of unknown results. Maybe I could appear as a, you know, maybe to gain some approval from, you know, people. Hey, Ade is very free and, you know, dancing and things like that. You know, his vibrational level is very high. but I get what you're saying, and I think part of it is, you know, just doing it. You know, just you got to step in. So I think if I were to have to resolve all of my habits and neuroses and everything else before I start anything, I would never start. So these things, you know, perhaps in a way, have to come into the mix. They come into the mix, you know, as I am, you know, showing up exactly as I am, you know, is, I think, important, you know, rather than just staying stuck and, you know, just confined to the ways that make me feel comfort and that kind of false belief of control, of knowing what's going to happen next, you know.
Yeah, so I think, so I think sometimes in the spiritual search, it's the idea that sometimes you have to do all these things first. So you meditate for 20 years and you do this and you do this. But if you come from the knowing, then from there, there's the unraveling or you start looking at things within yourself. So I would say that since last 2 years, more things have unraveled since then than before, because you look at them and you see the fruits and things that have grown inside you. So you start looking clearly at these things. So it's not about being perfect, because these quirks and intricacies and little things are what make what's coming through you, and that is important. That's your uniqueness. And that uniqueness is why there is no two snowflakes that are alike. There are no two leaves that are alike. Twins they're different. There are no blades of grass which are the same. And isn't that an incredible thing? And I think maybe in this non-dual practice, that it may come through this body in a certain way with certain language, but it will come through yours in your unique way as well. So we don't have to tie ourselves down to the words and the scripts, but we can use our own way of explaining, of comprehending, of sharing. It comes unique through you in your way. And I find that is an incredible thing as well.
Yeah.
And maybe, I think Rupert Spira says this. He says that you may have pulled the plug out of the fan, but the fan's still running. So there are still things in here that are still running, you know, things that from my childhood and my life, and I've picked up in my concepts, definitely. that but the fan's still running. Of course, there's not the identity to it anymore. And it's looking at it and watching it, but it's still there. And every day is a learning process. It's a growing process. It's a sharing process. And learning. Yeah, I'm still learning.
Yeah.
I'm still learning. And the magic of it as well is just like, so if you think of it as well, what did it take for you and I to be sitting here having this conversation? It took so many unbelievable coincidences, just for you and I to sit here. So when you look at the magnitude of this life from what is possible and what we can do, and it's culminating now in this conversation. That's quite incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It is.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then there's magic in all parts of life, yes? So there's magic here. When you finish here and you go and speak to someone else, there's magic there. There's magic in every conversation. There's magic in every meeting. There can be magic when you're going to the park or you're in your garden or whatever.
Yeah.
At the same time, we still have our frustrations. We still have our things. We still have our what's going on? Yeah, of course, we still have that. It's no perfection, but even that's got some magic in it. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that that's a good way to end. Yeah, we're coming up. Wow, this is the longest interview. They're usually around an hour, so it was a really nice conversation. It's about 10:50 a.m. now. So,
so it's 10:50 p.m. here. Yeah, it's been thank you for inviting me. Thank you for the conversation. I've really enjoyed it. It's been fun.
Yeah, me too. It was my pleasure, and I feel like sometimes these interviews are like more beneficial for me. I feel like so it's really nice because I get so much out of them. Each person brings, as you were saying, something unique, and I feel like in this this conversation, was able to. Sometimes I feel like we need someone else to kind of hold space and to be there as we investigate certain parts of ourselves. So I got that from this conversation. I feel a little bit more at ease with being myself. So thank you for that.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Just to speak about these things, and sometimes to find a language can be difficult, but if we're given time to talk, and sometimes it takes an hour and plus to really go through things, because if we're playing jazz, it's not a linear story. It's back, it's forth, it's in and out. We talked about movies, we talked about songs, we talked about jazz, we talked about so it's all part of it, really.
Yeah.
So thank you very much.
Thank you again.